This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Today on Voices of Gray, we are going to look at the history of farming in Gray County, starting with its settlement by immigrant farmers. We'll also talk with two local food producers, one in dairy and one in the fish farming industry. They'll tell us about the new technology that allows them to increase production in the most efficient and environmental ways possible. But first, for a little background. In the early settler years, self-sufficiency meant survival. There were no good roads, no markets, and no stores. The first spring, settlers brought supplies such as flour, sugar, seeds, pots, tools, and clothing. Together with what they harvested from the forests, rivers, and lakes, they sustained themselves for their first summer. Settlers urgently needed to plant crops to harvest that fall to feed the family through the first winter. Using only hand tools, they cleared stumps. Then they broadcast wheat seeds in the most open and sunny areas, planted potatoes around the stumps and logs, and raised turnips in the shaded edges of the clearing. While they grew wheat, barley, potatoes, and turnips as field crops, the vegetable garden offered more variety with carrots, onions, corn, beets, cabbage, beans, and peas. Hungry for fresh food after the long winter, settling families supplemented their diet with forest offerings: leeks and fiddleheads, cow cabbage, dandelion greens, strawberries, mushrooms, and even passing flocks of turkeys and passenger pigeons. Family members accomplished almost all work by hand. Spring chores included leaching the ashes from the winter fires to produce lye and potash. They combined the lye with rendered fat to make soap. The settlers sold potash for use as fertilizer and in the production of beer, cement, and other products. Most settling families did not start out with any animals and depended on hunting for meat. In the first years, the settlers had nothing to feed domesticated animals and nowhere to protect them through the long winter months. Usually the milch cow came first, and in the spring, the cow had her calf and began to milk again. The original barns of Gray County, hastily constructed as protection against the first winter, soon proved too small for increasing livestock herds. Bank barns, built into the side of a small hill, had stone-walled stables for the livestock with an accessible barn floor above for hay and grain storage. Stones and logs came from the fields as they were cleared. The bank barn style became the standard across the rolling fields of the county. Animals stayed warm in winter below ground level, and hay stayed dry in the airy loft above. Frequently erected in a building bee, these construction projects gathered neighbors together to accomplish a great task and offered a chance to socialize. 20 to 30 years into the settlement of Gray County, people had access to a great variety of things that the early settlers lacked. New businesses in the towns and villages served the needs of the growing farm community. Farm labor became more efficient with improved seeds and livestock and innovative farm implements. New farm buildings could be designed using sawn lumber, pumps, and pipes for running water. The money for purchasing new building materials had to be generated from the farm, and the shift from production for survival to production for sale marks the watershed between the first settlers and the second generation of Gray County farmers. The government was keen to ensure success for farm settlers. The provincial government established the Ontario School of Agriculture in 1874, which became the Ontario College of Agriculture in 1880. The first demonstration apple orchard was set up near Collingwood in the 1880s. Red Fife wheat, developed in Ontario specifically for its resistance to rust, replaced early varieties. Improved breeds of livestock from Europe became more available as the new steamships reduced ocean crossings from months to days. Selective breeding increased the size of the Durham Shorthorn, the settlers' milk cow, and traveling stud services met the demand for improved breeding for both cattle and horses. Options for hogs, sheep, and farm fowl multiplied. By 1880, the county of Gray was an established, thriving agricultural community. In the Government of Ontario's publication of that year, Emigration, the British Farmers and Farm Labourers Guide to Ontario, it reads, "Gray is rather a new county. Settlement there commenced about the year 1842. The general character of the soil is good but diversified, consisting of clay, clay loam, and a large portion of what farmers call sharp soil, which is very productive if well tilled. Some of the townships, however, are rather stony, and the extreme north is somewhat broken by limestone rock. Gray is, on the whole, a good agricultural county. Wheat is the staple, while oats, peas, barley, and hay crops are above the average. Fruit is grown largely, and the country along the shores of the Georgian Bay is famed for the quality and vast quantities of the plums it produces. Grapes, peaches, and pears do well. The price of land ranges from $1,000 to $6,000 for farms of 100 acres. The average price, where 60 to 70 acres have been cleared and the buildings are good, may be put down to $3,000. There are many excellent openings in Gray for purchasers at the present time. Farms can be leased at $2 to $3 per acre, exclusive of taxes or statute labor. The waters in and around Gray County have and continue to be a vital resource. Indigenous and Métis communities have a continuing tradition of fishing. Looking broadly at the early fishing industry, local historian Melba Croft wrote that 9 million pounds of fish were caught in Georgian Bay in 1892, generally fetching 4 cents per pound and employing 1,047 fishermen. Jumping ahead to 1960, there were 4 dairies operating in Owen Sound alone: Crystal Dairy, Georgian Bay Dairy, Graham's Dairy, and the Scenic City Dairy, and dairy farming alone contributed $500,000 per year to the local economy.
Hi, I'm Philly Markowitz. Welcome to the farming edition of Voices of Gray. I'm the Economic Development Officer for Local Food for the County of Gray, and today we are at Gray Roots Museum in the Morstan Village, and we are in the barn because we are talking about agriculture. And my guest today, one of my guests today, is Arlen Taylor from Cedar Crest. And Arlen's going to tell us about their family farm and the fish that they raise and how it has changed over the last few decades and what the future looks like. Welcome.
Thank you.
Really nice to have you here. So let's start. Tell me a bit about yourself.
So I am a second generation fish farmer. It was not laid out in stone that that is what I was going to become. It was the furthest thing from that, actually. But long story short, I came back into the aquaculture world in 2013 and found the partner of my life at the same time. I had a baby, and history just keeps writing itself. My dad started fish farming in 1969. I literally was born on a fish farm. And life took me many places, and it brought me right back home at the end of the day.
And where's home?
So our main farm is in Allen Park, down between Hanover and Durham, and we have 4 other facilities, 5 in total, and home is at the fish farm.
So just for a little context, what were you doing before you decided to come home?
I was doing a lot of different things. I think I was like a lot of other kids that grew up in Gray County and felt kind of oppressed by everything, and I had no idea what I wanted to do or who I wanted to be or
other than
anything.
Run away.
Other than run away, and that much was certain.
Yeah.
So I was 18 and I took off 2 days later, and I didn't come back for 10 years. My life took me to school in the United States. It took me to school in South Africa. It took me for some mission work in Angola and Mozambique and the Sudan and Ethiopia and all over sub-Saharan Africa. It took me to working with the UN in Iraq and Syria, and that was my last deployment before my dad asked me to come home.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So what was the, what guided your decision when your dad made that ask of you?
So to be a tailor means an inherent sense of responsibility. So my dad, oftentimes when I was between contracts, I would come home for 1 month, 3 months, and I'd help him out. My dad was an older father. He's now 78. He was 44 when he had me. So he was an older guy. He started our family farm when he was 52, and life was speeding up. The industry started speeding up. New technology was coming in. My dad prided himself on his memory and his capacity to remember everything without paper, which was wonderful, which is really cool, except it's not written down anywhere. So
Right.
we all live off of his version of events.
Yes.
Dad asked me to come home, and he'd never asked that.
Right.
He often told me to leave. He would drive me to the airport.
Clearly you reconciled that.
Yes.
So tell me about the changes on the farm since you've been back. Or why don't we start with what the farm looked like originally and how it looks now?
So my dad started our main farm in 1995. It was a journey that took a long time. It took him 8 years of figuring out which regulations and how, and permits and licenses. So he started fairly small. He had the design. My father engineered the whole thing based on experience. But it was, there was the house, and the garage served as the feed shed, and the basement of the house is where our hatchery was. And so it was very small. And then over the years, he slowly enveloped it out a little bit more, as finances, as his investment allowed. So when I came in, it was a farm still acting in the old way. So we did a little bit of everything. We had some food fish, we had some pond fish, we had multiple species, we had some fingerlings, we had some broodstock. And it was sort of a hodgepodge, and you kind of made it all happen.
Right.
And then in 2011, my dad had the opportunity to buy out his competition. So he bought 2 facilities, which were a similar story. They had kind of done a little bit of everything, but they were run down. They were very, very run down. My father had the most, still to this day, it's the most modern facility of its type in Ontario. But these farms had been built in the 70s.
Right.
And I asked my dad before I left on my last deployment, and I said, what are you going to do with them? Like, they need love, they need care, they need everything. And he said, they're fine.
You didn't think so?
I didn't think so at all. And for me, part of the reason why I never thought fish farming was in my future was just one site with this is the way it's done was not good enough for me. And so then he all of a sudden was going to do that with 3 sites. This is the site, and this is how it's done. And that wasn't interesting. So then when I came on board in 2013, Dad had started to forage into the world of some potential technology. So he had bought a fish pump, and
Can you describe what I would love for you to describe what a modern fish farm looks like, but specifically a fish pump.
So a fish pump kind of revolutionizes everything. So the old days, we'll call them, which we still do some of these activities, is netting fish out of tanks, and you put them in a bucket, and you weigh them, and then you put them back in the tank, and then when they're ready to go, you net them back out, and you put them on a truck. The fish pump is essentially a 6-inch hose plugged full of water, running the whole time continuously. It has a centrifugal force centrifuge pump that allows the fish to spin through. They don't hit anything, and they just swim up through and go on their merry way to another tank, onto a truck, whatever beautiful thing they want to do. So it's easy, it's great, it's animal welfare is top notch with them, with the design that we use. So Dad had bought one of these, and all of a sudden he didn't need 5 people to load a truck at 4 o'clock in the morning. Right. So things started changing with that. The farm managers that we started with didn't believe the technology was possible. They thought they could do it faster, they could do it better, so we dealt with that. And then we started buying in other equipment like fish counters, computerized fish counters. So again, we used to weigh everything out by hand, and we would be, finding an average weight. They would have been graded to size by hand. And then we bought a fish counter.
And how many fish would you be raising at that time that you would have had to have
when I started in 2013 with 3 facilities, it was a really big deal the first season to ship 1 million fish.
And now?
Now we ship 3 million a season.
Right, so this is why you need something to help you with the counting.
You need something to help with the counting. It also provided proof to our clients, because at the same time as we were getting bigger, so were our clients. They went from smaller family-run net pen operations in Georgian Bay to huge monoliths of operations. So everything was changing at the same time, and that's, I think, what really scared my dad. And he went to a meeting right before he called me, and one of the clients came to him and said, I need so many fish. And then the buyer that buys all the fish from that farm said, oh no, he needs 3 times that number of fish. And the numbers just got too big for my dad.
Right.
It was way too much. So that's why he got scared, I think. And he said, I can't do this. He was 72 at the time. He said, like, I can't do the next frontier.
Yeah, and your brother has joined you.
My brother did join me. So
Yeah.
in the same sort of evolutionary aspect, operationally, I came on really strong, sometimes too strong. But I came on and we changed the operations. We centered our attentions. We really went for the fingerlings, which is producing 4 to 8 inch fish, producing them, and we just went for it.
Yep.
2017 was a huge year for us. It was a banner year. We did over 5 million fish, which was a huge feat for my guys.
That's massive.
But I couldn't do the admin
Right.
and the operations, and I have a tiny human that I'm responsible for, and the balance was not happening very well.
Now, and it's not just you. You have, what is your total staff across all your facilities?
Across all of our facilities today is 12 full-time plus 4 part-times. So it wasn't just me. But my mom was helping me run the admin as well, and we kind of needed to progress further. And she also wanted to retire. She'd already retired from 2 other careers, and she helped me, and it was just getting to the end of it.
Yeah.
So I asked my brother to come back, and it was part of the succession plan of the farm.
We have 1 minute, believe it or
Okay.
not. So I have an important question to ask, and that is, how has the farm responded over the last 6 months in light of the COVID pandemic? Because I understand there have been changes.
Yeah, there have been huge changes. So long story short, we need to be sustainable. We've been sustainable in all things environmental. We need to be economically sustainable.
Yeah.
So we've completely changed our model.
Yeah.
We are now selling fish direct to consumer. We opened our own processing plant. We somehow mounted in 2 months during COVID. And it's going amazing. It's just a completely new thing for us. So we're diversifying again.
Because you were used to doing volume for other people to raise and get to the market across Ontario or across Canada?
Across Canada.
Across Canada, and now you're serving the local market.
We're serving local market with amazing customers and clients.
Fantastic. And what do you think your priorities are going to be in the coming year? I know, none of us can see the future. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
I can't see beyond the end of my nose some days. Realistically, it will be continue to make it sustainable and continue. I hope that the speed of the local food movement and acknowledgement continues and is embraced. We're so grateful. We are so grateful for the community that has stood to rise with us. I can only hope that that continues and even goes further afield.
That's amazing. I hope you continue in that success as well. How can people find out more about you if they want to?
They can look up Cedar Crest Trout Farms.ca. They can look up springhills.ca. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We have websites. We're on YouTube. We're pretty much everywhere.
And with me is our guest, Courtney Daynard, and she is of Valley Kirk Farms, which is right around the corner from here. It is a dairy operation, and she's here to tell us what a modern dairy is like. Hello and welcome.
Hi, thank you so much.
Really nice to have you here. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, okay, so where do I start? Well, I'm a first-generation farmer, and I didn't originally grow up here, so I grew up in Belleville, Ontario.
Right.
And I met my now husband when we went to university. I was at the University of Guelph, and he was at Ridgetown. And so long story long, we got married, and I moved here. So I moved to Grey County in 2008. Prior to that, I was studying at U of G. I was taking a master's in rural extension, which is, you know, people are like, what's that? Well, so basically I studied the demographics and the populations and the trends in small towns, which is pretty appropriate because I basically ended up in a small town-ish. So yeah, so I've been here since 2008. I work on the farm with my husband and his family, and I also work as an agricultural editor and journalist, which is a real job and it's super fun. And yeah, so we have our dairy farm, and we have a little girl, she's 2.5, and we're just right around the corner. It literally took me 3 minutes to drive here. So yeah, so that's a little bit about my background.
Excellent. So, so tell me about the farm that you're on now and what it was like when you arrived, and then maybe walk me through just a little bit about what it's like now, because I know that a lot of changes have happened.
Yeah, so I'll take one step back a little further. The farm was purchased in 1982 by my in-laws, that's Bob and Mary Ann Kirkconnell. Now they're first generation farmers. So they purchased in the early 80s, high interest rates, astronomical prices. So they had 6 kids, and out of those 6 kids, my husband is the oldest, that's Rob, and he was the only one who wanted to take over the farm. So he went away to school, came back, worked off farm, and then eventually said, I want to farm full time. So when I arrived on the farm was at a stage where it was milking about 50 cows in a tie stall operation. So they would be milked twice a day, morning and afternoon, every single day of the week. And when Bob and Mary Ann had purchased the farm, they were milking about 40. So we'd grown a little bit. So at that time, doing the chores every day, we run about 300 acres, growing hay and barley and peas and oats and corn. And we don't cash crops, so the crops that we do grow go into the feed that then feed the cows, which then produce the milk.
Right.
So that's kind of where the operation was around 2008. And in 2017, we made a very big transition on the farm. We decided to basically gut the entire barn and do a retrofit and create a robotic milking facility. So that was about 3 years ago now. So now we have this robotic milker. The cows can get milked on demand. We have room in the barn for about 60 cows. Today we're milking, I think my husband said we had about 53 go through the milker this morning, so it fluctuates a little. We'll talk a little bit more about their technology, but we've put in some new technologies, and we're still running the same amount of land, and that's kind of where the farm is at today. So we have 3 generations on the farm right now, which is a big change since 1982 when it began.
Absolutely. So tell me just briefly about the technology and what what robotics is and how it changes your workflow.
Yeah, it really, really does. So the robotics that we have on the farm, first of all, the milker. So we have a Lely milker. It's called an A4 Astronaut. So it's this big old robot. The cows can walk up. They can get milked on demand 365 days a year, 24/7. So that's a big difference because now we don't have a human milking the cows. So that robot replaced essentially a full-time worker on our farm. So, and I shouldn't say replaced because I know robotics have a bad, have a bit of a spin on replacing workforce.
Well, it sounds like it allowed Rob's folks to
Rob's parents were retiring.
Yes.
So Rob's parents kind of have been a little bit retiring out. So, so we have the robotic milker. We also have an automated feed conveyor system where feed goes out to the cows basically every few hours, all day long, all night long. We have a feed pusher. It's called a Lely Juno. It pushes all the feed up to the cows, and it makes sure they have feed in front of them all the time. We have LED lights. We have fans. We have automated curtains that run on a thermostat. There's a lot in this barn that helps the humans and helps the cows. So your second part of the question was, how has that changed our day-to-day life on the farm? And the answer is it's changed it significantly, and we think positively. So we don't have to be in the barn specifically at certain hours to milk because the cows are always being milked. It allows us to focus on our crops and our land a lot more with more flexibility. It's a lot less wear and tear on your body. Milking cows was very wear and tear on your body. It's a lot more dinners together as a family. Dinner time was always milking time. So we have a lot of dinners right now. You
can focus on your other career as well.
Well, and then I work off farm as an editor. So just given us a lot more flexibility and a lot more freedom, really. And allowed us to maintain the job and the farm and the unit with the four of us working together that we love. We may have changed roles, but everyone's still working on the farm and everyone now has a new role.
Right.
And 3 years in, we couldn't be happier.
That's fantastic. So there's two more things that I want to touch on briefly in our short amount of time. And the first one is, I'm going to tell you what they both are so you can gauge the importance here. The first one is how COVID-19 affected the farm, because I know there was a massive upheaval at the beginning in the dairy industry. And the other, I want to talk about your work around mental health on farms. And perhaps they fit together. I'm going to let you guide that. Perhaps the COVID-19 first.
Yes, okay. So the first answer, COVID-19. You know, on the whole, things have been going business as usual. They really have. Yeah. There was a little bit of disruption in April. We did have to dump about 4,000 liters of milk down the drain, which was really heartbreaking and really difficult and really complicated. There was a lot of issues around the processing sector, and there was just nowhere to put the milk that the farmers were producing. So we made the really tough move, and we were told we had to dump this milk, and we dumped the milk. So 4,000 liters at April. Since then, we've dumped nothing. So since then, it's basically been business as usual. Biosecurity has always been really big in the farming industry, really big in the dairy sector. So we did have to implement just a couple little more biosecurity tactics. They've essentially added about 10 to 15 minutes max onto the daily schedule. We were already doing all the biosecurity anyway. So that's kind of stuff around our production and our pickup in the sector. For COVID-19, kind of segueing into the mental health conversation, mental health in agriculture and mental illness in agriculture has something that's been, you know, not often talked about for so many decades, and we're actually one of the segments of the population that are impacted more than the general population. Anxiety, depression, suicide, it's very, very rampant in the agriculture farming community. So when COVID hit, I was very concerned about that. We're already dealing with trade deals, with debt, with weather, with fluctuating markets.
So much uncertainty.
So much. And now we add in a global pandemic. So that was tough. We definitely, I know I cried when we had to dump that milk. I know I cried when I was worried about the other farmers in the industry. And that being said, the topic of mental health and mental illness, the conversation is coming, it is developing. There are some supports that we didn't have.
So where can people find resources? In the last seconds we have, is there somewhere you want to direct people should they want to?
It's still not that easy to navigate, but there are some sector and agriculture specific resources out there. There is a foundation called the Do More Ag Foundation, and now that's AG.
Yes, Do More Ag.
Do More Ag. They have a full list of resources on their website. Always start with your family doctor if you have one. There's always the local emergency room. Reach out to a friend, a neighbor. The conversation is happening and the resources are becoming more available, so don't hesitate to try to look for them.
Courtney, thank you so much for taking the time to come out and talk with us. We really, really appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. Thank you.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
I'm the host of HealthLink. HealthLink connects home, community, and healthcare. Please join me for HealthLink on Rogers TV.
It's closing time, and you stayed out longer than you planned. So now you can't drive, and the buses have stopped running. You could always call your girlfriend